1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Josh, thank you so much.
My name is Ray Shell, and I'm an actor, a writer, producer, director, singer, an entertainment producer. My first public performance was probably at the age of 8 at a place in New York City called Little Carnegie Hall. And it was my Aunt Juanita, she wanted me to study piano. We didn't have piano at home, but she could play beautifully, and she would always do these amazing concerts at Little Carnegie Hall. So I wanted some of that. So I did my first concert at Little Carnegie Hall at 8. But then when I realized that the oils and stuff that she rubbed on her hands did not automatically and magically let her play, you had to practice, it then became a little bit less fun because I didn't particularly enjoy practicing. I still don't. I learned enough piano to play my recital and nothing else. Because like I said before, I just didn't, I don't know, all my life, anything that I had to do that meant that I had to actually study for it, I wasn't too interested in it. That sort of changed when I actually became an actor, because you do have to study and you do have to learn and you do have to remember. Acting sort of brought me out of that and made me maybe a fully rounded artist in terms of taking the research into hand and taking the practice into hand.
Was there anyone in particular who you looked at?
Yeah, my father actually, my stepfather, his name is Charles Shell. He's the man that actually adopted me. My name should be Aris Lancaster, but my biological father never married my mother. So Mr. Shell did. He was my Sunday school teacher, and because he was my Sunday school teacher, I had to be in all the pageants, the Easter pageant and the Christmas pageant, Mother's Days and Father's Day pageants. And he directed all those things, and he gave me a bit of advice, directorial-wise, that none of the great directors that I worked with, including Trevor Nunn, never gave me. What he said is that if you see it, the audience will see it. He had this the scene was a bus, and he says, how do you get on the bus? So I just sort of went to my seat. He says, no, how do you get on the bus? I says, you have to go to the front, and you have to put the money in the coin thing, and then you have to walk down the aisles, and you have to find your seat. He said, show me that. So what we had was these chairs that were set up. He says, we can't afford to bring a big old bus in here, but if you see the bus, the audience will see the bus. And that was the best piece of acting advice that anyone's ever gave me. And this is from a man who had less than a third grade education. He was the best director I ever worked with. I was blessed to went to a high school in New York City. I went to Franklin K. Lane High School. And along with their sports agenda and everything else, for the jocks who never went to school and got all the girls and all, they didn't have to, they had, as long as they kept winning, they were cool. They also had a drama club, and a teacher there, Mary McNellis, I'll never forget Miss McNellis, she actually casted me in Harvey, I think it was, a show called Harvey about the big invisible rabbit. And she casted me in a part called Dr. Chumley, which meant I had to pay a lot older than I was. And she kept casting me in different things, and she was able to see something in me back then that I didn't even know I had. And this was before, the professional work that nobody knows at hair. So she gave me a love. I loved the entire process, the camaraderie, the rehearsals after school, the opening night, the audiences and stuff like that. So that was instilled with me in high school. And what happened then too as well was that if there was a Broadway show that wasn't selling out, we would get the tickets. So I was able to see my first Broadway show, which was Wait Until Dark with Lee Remick. I was able to see Funny Girl without Streisand, she had left. I saw The Apple Tree with Barbara Harris, which was just amazing. Those three I remember. They stay in my memory. Those are the three that I remember. But we were able to see those for free. And I remember me and my best friend at the time, Dennis Duke, would go there with our little cashmere coats with the cashmere sticker visible so people could actually see, admire, and envy us. And I knew that this was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Well, the first professional job I did, I do believe it was the Me Nobody Knows. And I was I've always been, uber ambitious. I wanted to audition for this show, but you had to have an agent, and I didn't have an agent then. So what I did, I believe in destiny. I believe, the universe. I believe the Lord. I was raised that way. So I went to this building called the Brill Building. This is the way the Lord works. I went to the Brill Building, and this was a building that had all these different agents. And I just sort of picked one. The name was Erlinda Zetlin, and personal managers. So I just knocked on the door and said, look, there's an audition for a show that I want to go to and I want to be in, but I don't have an agent. Can you help me? And she says, well, can you sing? And I said, yeah. So she brought me in there. She said, sing. So I sang for her. And she wrote a note, gave me an address, sent me down to the audition. He said, if anybody says anything, tell them Erlinda Zetlin sent you. I went down there and I sang and I got the job. But what was the weird thing about it was that Erlinda Zetlin, of all the people that I could actually have bumped into, she was the manager of the director of the show. So I got the job. And what I didn't understand back then, I was only looking for a summer job because I promised my mother I wouldn't leave school. I'd finish school. So the producers and everybody came, from New York to see me, and they were very kind of coy. They didn't say, we love you and we want you and all this kind of stuff. They wanted to know, what are you doing next? I said, I'm going back to school. And they were going like, you're not going to go back to New York and try to... I said, no, I promised my mother I'd go back to school. And I realized now they were trying to find out what I wanted to do next so that they could put me into something. But I didn't dig that thing. I didn't know that was going on. So the Me Nobody Knows and the show that followed that, which was Hair, were both summer jobs for me. In fact, when I did the Me Nobody Knows, the touring company of Hair that had Meatloaf in it, Donna Summers, and the Hair people came and saw me in a matinee and said, look, we want you to join the company. And I said, I can't. It's a finish. It's a promise my mother I wouldn't leave school. They said, well, that's okay. We have a role coming up in the summer and we'll contact you. And I was like, yeah, right, you're going to contact me. So I went back to my dorm, and a few months later, I'm at the top of the dorm. We had this nosy girl who always read everybody's mail. So she calls up, Ray, you got a letter from Hair. And I had totally forgotten about it. And sure enough, inside this orange letter with the Hair insignia was a contract. And what they wanted me to do was to meet them in Philadelphia. They sent me an airplane ticket and everything. They picked me up in Philadelphia, where I joined the company at the Schubert Theater. And I stayed at a place called the Sylvania Hotel. So my advent was magical, in that everything that's really happened to me in this business has been kind of easy for the first time, and I thought it would be like that all the time. But my first two shows, Hair and The Me Nobody Knows, were summer jobs. Most people worked at Macy's or did something. Those were my summer jobs. There were things that happened. In fact, I remember seeing Hair for the first time. The first take, I didn't know can I cuss? I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, what is this? At the end of the show, when they sang Let the Sunshine In, that's when it all made sense. I was like, oh my God, that's what it is. It doesn't make any difference who or what you are, just as long as you're letting the sunshine into your heart and sending out love. That's when it clicked. But the rest was like, what the fuck? Because I did not. Hippies, it's like, I was a church boy. I didn't even have a proper, I couldn't even dance. We weren't allowed to go to those things. So I was sort of like an observer. So no, the answer is no, they never saw me naked.
Thanks for letting me know that.
I created the role of Rusty in the sense that I was the first Rusty that ever played the part. But in anything in terms of theater, it's collaboration. So my creation was based on the material that Lloyd Webber and Trevor Nunn presented before me. Trevor Nunn is a very exacting director. I mean, exacting meaning that he is specific about what you do, where you do. He'll do the performance with you. I mean, seriously. The only way you're going to get out of one of Trevor's sessions is to do exactly what he says, the way he wants it. I was teaching at Pineapple Studios because I didn't think that theater was for me. I had auditioned for Cats. I'm not a dancer, so they had groups AAA for the great dancers to GGG for the not so great dancers. I was in group FGG. So I had a studio in Pineapple Studios, and I came out my studio one day, and there was a big poster that said, wanted very young people who could roller skate for Andrew Lloyd Webber's new musical Starlight Express workshop. And I was like, oh my God, can't this man write a show where you can just stand and sing? What do we have to do? Roller skating. So I wasn't going to go because I wasn't very young. Even back then, I thought they meant teenagers, and I wasn't a teenager. I was 30 years old. I had 2 kids and a wife. And I wasn't going to go. So one of my students, a young man called Richard Welford, he said to me, Mr. Shell, you're always telling us to go for things. Why don't you go for it? Because he had went and he didn't get it. Because I told the kids, I would tell them about any audition that I thought they would. I said, go down there and have a go. So I went home that night and I told my ex-wife, I said, look, boom, there's this audition for this show, roller skating. What do you think? So I had a pair of roller skates that EMI Records had given me for promotion. Yeah, that's a whole nother story. So I went to the audition next day, and I remember just skating in. I didn't know how to stop. So I sort of like gave the man my music, and Trevor Nunn said, ooh, theater and around, because I sort of just skated around, because I did not, so I got there, I sang, and at the end of the audition, Trevor Nunn said, please take your hat off, and I'm like, okay. I took my hat off, and he said, we just wanted to make sure you didn't have a tape recorder, because we can't believe your voice. And I was like, oh, that's nice. So I had 4 more auditions, and at the end of the auditions, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Trevor Nunn got up, and I said to myself, fuck, they're gonna tell me no nicely. And they got up, put their arms around me, and offered me the lead. And it changed my entire life. I mean, really, there's certain things that do change your life, and that was one of them. And we did the workshop, we did just the first act of it, but we knew at the end of that first act that we had something special. I went on tour after that with the Police, came back and went straight into rehearsals for Starlight. And briefly, we rehearsed on the flat stage in Kensal Rise for 6 weeks. And then we had to go into the theater and learn how to do it again on all the slopes and things, and that took another 6 weeks. So we were in rehearsal before we even actually opened for about 3 months. It was that whole entire process. And all I kept saying to myself, please, Lord, don't let me die or fall. Let me be able to get to this opening night, and we did. And the rest is definitely history. Well, the wonderful thing about Lloyd Webber is that he actually customizes his productions for whoever happens to be in it. So after I left, they found Rusties that could do all kinds of stuff, so they did that. But I remember me and Stephanie Lawrence had to win this race, and I was determined that I wasn't going to fall. So I skated low to the ground, and which meant that I I won, but I knocked everybody else down. So what they did, I started this race. I went up into the bridge, went around a corner, and then another Rusty would come out, and he ran the race because he was more of a stable skater. And then I would go climb down and go into the tunnel, and the other Rusty would come into the tunnel, and I would come out the tunnel and go, I must find Pearl, I must find Pearl. So I never won. I've been doing a bunch of self-tapes. In fact, I just got through doing one today before I came here. And what you have to do, because you have the magnification of the amplification of the camera, and you have the amplification of the microphone, it's judging. You don't have to actually shoot the lines to the back of the theater because the microphones will do that for you. In fact, the only show that I've ever had to do that, and they told me, Ray, just chill out, we'll take care of it, was Lion King. Lion King was like performing in a Disney movie because you didn't have to project, because they wanted to have the control because they had to put reverb here and thunder and lightning there. So all I had to do was just go in there and talk, and maybe talk like that. And I remember one day I got so friggin' bored. There's a song called, the Mufasa sings, He Lives in You. And I sort of veered from the path of it melodically and gave what became called the Chaka Khan version of He Lives in You. So I mean, the dialing back is really, really important. It's just a matter of scale. What has to remain there is the truth of the performance. And in some respects, maybe sometimes when you're actually getting back to yourself, to your real self as opposed to an amplification of yourself, that might be a bit difficult. In fact, right now, I'm still learning how to crack the whole self-tape process. And it's a trip because it's like the whole industry's post-pandemic has just changed in terms of how you get jobs. So it is definitely a dial back between projecting for the stage and the intimacy of the camera. I never imagined that I'd be writing novels. I mean, I always wrote. I always used to have something that I would write about. Like Tom I, and my first off-Broadway show was a show called Dementos. No, it wasn't. It was called The Dirtiest Musical in Town, actually. And it was written by Tom I and Henry Krieger, who went on to write Dreamgirls. In fact, it was weird. I was in a show with a lady called Nell Carter, and Nell Carter was supposed to be the Effie Melody White. They wrote the show for her, but she became a TV star. Long story short, if I would have stayed in America, I would have been in Dreamgirls. Arlene Phillips called me and said, look, we're doing the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber in America. Would you like to do it? And it's like, I'm reluctant. I mean, because I had already done it with Sarah Brightman, and I just bought this place, and I didn't want to be away from my kids for a whole year. But I said, okay, I'll go do it. So we went there. I remember being in New York with my sister. We went back to our old neighborhood to see the kids from the neighborhood. And, there was a guy there, your mother says, why can't you be like him? This guy was the smartest guy in the neighborhood, had the best girls, dressed wicked. I went to see him, knocked on the door, and when he came to the door, my first impression that I was looking at a satyr, half man, half beast. And this was this guy, and I was going like, what the fuck happened to you? And what happened to him was crack. He never mentioned the word, he never said that he had done it. I remember we come from a similar cultural background. Our parents would keep one room that you couldn't go into, plastic all over the seats, gated. But he had no furniture. You could see where the furniture had once been, the pictures and stuff. I was like, what happened to your furniture? He said, they took them. I'm going like, well, they who? He said, I never see them. I only see what they've done to me. And I was like, so the poetry came from him. So I said, oh, you mean like ghost people? He said, yes, they're ghost people. So a lot of the terminology and stuff that infuses ice came from this character. So after I left him, I felt like somebody had died. And we were in Ohio like the next day. So I went to a bookshop, and there was nothing in there about victims, the crack addicts themselves. They had sociological things about the sellers and the drug wars. So what I did was there was a bunch of addicts all over the place, so I started interviewing them, because I figured they would give me firsthand knowledge of what I was writing about, and they did. And I was in America for a year, and when I came back from America, I had Iced, I had the novel, and a few other things happened. I mean, there was a band I used to sing with, and my bass player, I told him about the book. He had read about the book. He was on a plane, and he just happened to be, that's what it's at, but how the Lord works. I believe if your destiny is there, it is for you, the universe will conspire to make this thing happen. He's sitting next to the American president of the Federation of Books, and this guy arranged for me to meet a man called Michael Peace, who's Madonna's publisher at Little and Brown. So here's me going up there to Warner Brothers and sitting down with this guy, and he says, look, this is great. I had only written 24 pages. He says, but we can't offer you a deal because we don't know if you could finish it. And I didn't know if I could finish it. So I went away. He said, finish it and come back. And I finished it, and I didn't have to come back because he was in New York. I was in London by that time. John said, look, send me your book. So I sent it to him, and I didn't know that, with record deals or books, they get trillions of books. I didn't know. So I called him up the next week. I said, have you read my book? He says, well, you just gave it to me. I said, no, I gave it to you last week. So he says, well, I'm not reading it, but I have somebody else reading it. The book was at that time called Diary of a Crack Addict. It wasn't called Iced. He says, how was that Diary of a Crack Addict? And somebody shouted out, it's fucking great. And he was like, oh. 2 days later, he sent me in the mail international book deal for the book, worldwide book deal, £5,000. And it wasn't even the money. It was like, somebody wants to publish my book. And so I called Tony, the guy that introduced me. He says, Ray, you can't take that deal. I said, what are you talking about? He says, nobody else has seen it. Nobody else has seen this book. So he called Mary Clemmy, Terry McMillan's agent, and said, this is what's happening. She says, Ray, let me deal this for you. I won't lose what you've gotten, but I do believe I can make it better. And she went from a book that was offered $5,000 to a worldwide publishing deal with about 5 or 6 international publishers, which was worth £350,000. This was like 1991. So by today's standards, that's like almost a half. You know what I mean? It was unbelievable, unbelievable. And that's how Iced happened. What happened was I wrote a stage version of Iced, and it was done by a company called Nitro, but I wasn't really happy with it because for me, it told the story secondhand. So what I did was rewrote it, and this one is called Black Thoughts in the Early Moon. And Lee Daniels who did Empire, The Butler. In fact, I just got through doing, well, not just got through, a couple of years ago, I did his film, The United States versus Billie Holiday with Andra Day, who gave the most incredible performance. He has the film rights. He's had the film rights for like 80 gazillion years, but I reserved the stage rights for myself. So this year I said, look, I want to do something with it. So he says, okay, you can have stage rights for the UK. My daughter Katrina knew Mia, and Mia had asked about me, and I was talking to Katrina and said, look, I'd like to get this show on its feet. Please give me stage rights. I need to find some place where I can do a reading. So Katrina called Mia. Mia met with me. She asked me to send her the script. I sent her the script. She said, yay, love it. And here we are. So what we're working on is a process for a stage reading of it, which hopefully will lead to a French performance of it, which will hopefully lead to it going worldwide, because you can get a hit anywhere. As long as the subject matter, as long as it's well produced, and Lee Daniels is looking on this thing, so it behooves me to get as much happening to it here, so that he can actually then give me the stage rights for the New York City. But that's how these things happen, and Mia is very well connected in terms of the people that she knows. There's some producers and stuff that have been able to move stuff from Brighton to Broadway. So that's what our aim is they get this thing happening here and get it to Broadway, because the film is happening, and everything that I can actually do to help the film helps me. So it is about actually, to you creatives out there, to young students, always try to connect whatever it is you're doing, connect it to the next stage of where you need to go with your project.
Will there be an audition process for the guys here?
I don't think that, since it's an educational situation, yeah, I will audition so that they get to feel the process of it. But I want the students here to feel like that sometimes school is the only place you can get to play the roles that you never get to play. you know what I mean? The Lears and the Shakespeares and all those kind of things. You may not ever get to play those in your commercial life, but here at school you can actually play anything. So I would like the students, if they feel, even if it's a girl, if they want to play the male protagonist, I'll audition, but I'll at the same time give them an opportunity to explore that gender switch, explore that racial split, explore that whole society thing. Because we as actors, I mean, I don't know what the younger I don't know what the younger generations of aspiring actors are like. Like, for instance, there's this whole situation where they're saying, if you're non-binary, you shouldn't be playing binary roles. If you're not black, you shouldn't be playing white roles. I agree with that to a certain extent, but at the same time, we are actors. We're meant to be able to embody all different kinds of characters, and we're meant to be able to take on the psychology and the physiology of that character to present it to an audience in the best of our abilities. And I don't think that you get that playing things or people that you know, that there's no research. I don't need to research Rachel, but I might need to research a blind person who is trans. You know what I mean? And I think where it gets to that part of it, now there are trans actors who actually have not been given the opportunities to portray their truths. So I do agree that portraying their truths is important, but at the same time, I don't think that we as actors should actually, I don't come from New York, so I don't want to play that kind of a role. I think that you shoot yourself in the foot if you don't at least take that foot and dip it into what I call the pool of creativity. Be encouraged by yourself. Be encouraged, how can I put it? The business is almost reopening again. Because of COVID and things that they put in place, it's almost, in a way, it feels harder because since COVID made it necessary for less interaction. Like, I'm used to being able to go into the room, meeting the director, meeting the writer. All of that's gone. They get a cold tape of you doing what they've written. So all the other different things, all the sociological things that you could bring to a meeting Sometimes they might just like you, might hate what you did, but they like you, and they say, okay, we work with that person, they can get there. You don't have, that's gone. So what it means that you have to become the best technician that you can. And you got to find a way of actually infusing all those different roles with, I call the cultural and the sociological bits that we're missing. You have to find a way of actually putting that into those words so they get a sense of you. They get a sense of your essence. And I admit that's difficult because you don't have that one-to-one. What you have to be, and what they're looking for, and back in the day, you go to an audition, they didn't want you to memorize it. They just wanted to hear you. You got to get that shit down now. You have to give these people a performance. You have to almost like, they hire a videographer just to do this audition. And the lights and the stuff. They want to, they're asking you to put your money where your mouth is. And that was never the case before. That's the way the business is, and who are we to say that they're wrong? I don't know. At the end of the day, it's us actors who are always at the bottom of the totem pole until you become Idris Elba or one of those kind of people. So I guess I would say you've got to be that much better now. Because since self-tape is the way, even now down to stage things, you have to self-tape. They don't get the essence of you being in the room live. And that's the hard bit. You know, that was like the extra thing. In fact, they don't even want you now on these self-tapes to say, hi, how are you? So you can actually get a little bit of your No, I don't want it. You don't want to see it. I was told today, do not say hi to the casting director. Just give them your name, your height, your agent, if you're inside the city that you're auditioning for, and will you be available in the city where they're filming it. It's cut and dry. Which in a way, I mourn. Because part of being in this business is the whole social interaction, you know, getting to know people, you know, the whole camaraderie, gone. You probably, and you will get that, that'll get back once you get into the show. But again, now with all these COVID restrictions, you do this scene and you want to get away from whoever happens to be around you because you don't want to get sick. So it's a whole different, it's a different business. It really, really is. No more huggies and kissies and none of that, you know, none of that stuff. You might even, some people don't even want you to shake their hand. And that's because of this pandemic. A show I did, Tony Stone, we opened in San Francisco and closed the same night. We opened it, we rehearsed this thing, did 6 previews. We did the show on I think it was a Thursday. And they say, okay, they told us that we got some great, the good news is you did a great show. The bad news is that we're closing on Sunday. We didn't even get to Sunday. They closed it that night. Yeah.
So the message is, stay strong, everyone.
Yeah, stay strong and develop your other interests. Have plan B. Have plan B. You know, so if plan A does not work, I'd say find a plan B that you would not mind doing for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Because so many people, they never do what they want. They spend their entire lives doing jobs that they absolutely hate. And I thank the Lord I've been blessed most of my life to do what I want to do. You know, so but that does mean that there's a certain amount of working on yourself that you have to do. You know, I sort of downplayed my talent thing, but the talent has got to be there. You know, you have to have what they call now your superpower. You got to know what your superpower is and work that superpower. Yeah, I have a new book out called Carolina Red. You can get it on Amazon. Carolina Red is, if God wrote a history of the United States, Carolina Red would be it. So it's a bit interesting. It's interesting. I was thankful and blessed to actually, the film rights are owned by a company called Sugar Films here in this country, Sugar Films and Sky Drama. And again, it's about American history, but it's about American history, the American history that people like the GOP, the Republicans in America don't want it. You know, it's like the critical race theory. They don't want their kids to know what bastards their ancestors were, basically. They don't want them to know that. And I think that's sad because what young America, especially young white America, needs to know is why black people in America are angry and upset. They need to know that. And I tend to think that if they were told that honestly, And if they were told that truthfully, then some sort of understanding might come about. But right now, it's like they think, what do you, why are you so upset? My family didn't enslave you, but what they don't get is that this country, all the articles in the American Bill of Rights and all that stuff, none of that stuff was meant for black people or people of color. None. It wasn't even meant for white women. It was for white men, period. And what they really need to deal with is the history. Until America deals with its history and deals with the past, and especially racism and slavery and what they did to the Indians, because when you get right down to it, the Indians are the original Americans. Everybody else are. Everybody else are immigrants. And black people are stolen goods. They stole us from Africa. You know what I'm saying? So the only people that got any kind of right to America are the Indians, the indigenous original people, like the Aborigines in Australia. It's a worldwide thing. The powers that be have got to acknowledge, well, we messed up, we did that. These people actually added to the value of our country, and people need to be compensated. We'll be just going through all this stupidness, and it is stupidness. I mean, one of the part of the reason why I'm glad I'm here, because I just don't want to hear the American noise anymore. I mean, it's just like, between CNN and Fox, it's like, oh, please. Carolina Red is on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. That's Carolina Red by Ray Shell. You can get Carolina Red and Ice there. And another book I wrote about Spike Lee, which is called The Eternal Maverick. And the hard copy of Carolina Red will be out in a couple of months. I finished editing it. I've just got to get it to the printers and do all that kind of nonsense. And I got another book coming out later on next spring called An Eye, a Tooth, which is a revenge ghost story. So I'm just, trying to go around different kind of genres. And look out for Carolina Red's teleseries.
I was just about to ask that, because I want being translated as well to screen.
Yeah.
So the Ice is going to play.
Well, Ice is a play and a film by Lee Daniels, and Carolina Red's going to be a television series by, hopefully, HBO Max, I think it is.
You are a massive, massive inspiration.
People have inspired me. We inspire each other.
That's the most important thing, I think, in the performing industry now, is to inspire each other.
Yeah, we have to.